The finish line was just 2 miles away. David had been hiking for almost 6 months, and he could hardly believe his journey was about to end. His legs were stronger than they had ever been, his backpack felt light, and he had never been more sure about what he wanted to do with his life. But the best part was knowing that Maya would be waiting for him at the end. She had driven up the night before and was staying in a small inn near the trail's final marker. David had wanted to surprise her by finishing early, but Maya was too good at planning. She had calculated exactly when he would arrive based on his daily mileage reports. When David finally reached the end of the trail, Maya was sitting on a bench reading a book. She looked up and saw him walking toward her, and the smile that spread across her face made every difficult day on the trail worth it. "You did it," she said, jumping up to hug him. "I can't believe it's over," David said, holding her tight. "6 months ago, I had no idea what I was doing with my life. Now I feel like I can do anything." "You can do anything," Maya said. "I've watched you change over these months. You're not the same person who got lost in that storm." They celebrated that night at a nice restaurant in town. David had been eating camp food for so long that a real meal with Maya felt like the most luxurious thing in the world. They talked about his plans to look for work with environmental organizations, and Maya's decision to finally apply for travel nursing positions. "I handed in my notice at the hospital last week," Maya told him over dessert. "Really?" David asked, excited. "How do you feel about it?" "Scared," Maya said honestly, "but also excited. You inspire me to take the risk. If you can spend 6 months walking through the mountains to figure out your life, I can try a new career." "Where do you think you'll go first?" David asked. "I'm hoping to get a position somewhere out west." Maya said, "Maybe Colorado or California, somewhere with good hiking." David grinned. "That sounds amazing. I've been thinking about looking for jobs in those areas too." 6 months later, David was working for a nonprofit that helped kids from low-income families experience the outdoors. For the first time, Maya was working at a hospital in Colorado, taking groups of nurses on weekend hiking trips to help them deal with stress. They were living in the same city for the first time since they met, and it felt like everything was falling into place. One weekend in early fall, David suggested they go camping. "I know a great spot," he said. "Really beautiful. Good protection from the weather." Maya agreed, curious about where he wanted to take her. She was surprised when they ended up back at the same campsite where they had first met. The big rocks were still there, and the spot where her tent had been was exactly as she remembered it. "Why here?" Maya asked as they set up camp. "You'll see," David said mysteriously. They cooked dinner over the camp stove and watched the sunset paint the sky in amazing colors. Maya noticed that David seemed nervous, which was weird because he was usually so relaxed when they were camping together. As the stars started coming out, David reached into his backpack and pulled out a small box. Maya's heart started beating faster. "David, I know this is a crazy place to do this," David said, opening the box to reveal a simple, beautiful ring. "But this is where everything started for us. This is where you saved my life, not just from the storm, but from being lost in general." Maya stared at the ring, then at David, then back at the ring. "I love you," David continued. "I love your sense of humor, your kindness, your courage. I love how you make me want to be a better person. I love how you found me at my lowest point and somehow saw something worth saving." David. Maya whispered. "Maya, will you marry me?" He asked. "Will you keep saving me every day for the rest of our lives?" Maya started crying and laughing at the same time. "Yes," she said. "Of course, yes." David slipped the ring onto her finger with shaking hands. And then Maya kissed him under the same stars that had been shining the night they met. "I have a confession," Maya said later as they sat by their small campfire, her head on David's shoulder. "What?" David asked. "I wasn't really asleep that night when you came into my tent," she said. I was asleep at first, but I woke up when I heard you moving around. I watched you for a while before I decided you weren't dangerous." "Really?" David asked, surprised. "Really?" Maya said. "And I have to admit, even though the whole situation was crazy, There was something about you that made me curious. Maybe it was how hard you were trying not to wake me up, or how genuinely exhausted you looked, but I had this weird feeling that you were going to be important somehow. You had good instincts, David said, kissing the top of her head. The best, Maya agreed. They were married the following spring in a small ceremony at a mountain lodge. Maya wore a simple white dress and hiking boots. David wore a suit with a tie that had tiny mountains printed on it. Their wedding cake was decorated with a fondant tent, and their wedding favors were small compasses with their names and the date. During his speech, David told the story of how they met. He talked about getting lost in the storm, making the terrible decision to enter Maya's tent, and waking up to find the most amazing woman he had ever met. Sometimes, he said, raising his glass, the biggest mistakes of your life lead to the best things that ever happened to you. Maya didn't just let me into her tent that night. She let me into her life, and I've been grateful every single day since. Maya stood up and added her own toast. They say home is where the heart is, she said, looking at David. But I learned that sometimes home is a person who makes you feel safe even when you're completely lost. 5 years later, they run a wilderness therapy program together, helping people who are going through difficult times find peace and direction in nature. They still camp in that same spot every year on their anniversary, remembering the stormy night that brought them together and changed everything. The rain started small, just tiny drops hitting David's face as he walked through the mountain trail. He had been hiking for 3 weeks now, and every day felt like a new adventure. His backpack was heavy, but he didn't mind. This trip was supposed to help him clear his mind and figure out what to do next with his life. David looked up at the sky. Dark clouds were rolling in fast, much faster than he expected. The weather app on his phone had said light rain, but this looked different. This looked scary. Within minutes, the tiny drops turned into heavy rain. Then the wind started howling through the trees. David pulled his jacket tighter and kept walking. But it was getting harder to see the trail markers. The rain was coming down so hard it felt like someone was pouring buckets of water on his head. He tried to stay calm. David had been hiking for years, and he knew that panic was the worst enemy in situations like this. But as the minutes passed, the storm got worse and worse. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by thunder that shook the ground under his feet. The trail became muddy and slippery. David had to grab onto tree branches to keep from falling. His boots were completely soaked, and water was getting inside his jacket no matter how tight he zipped it. The cold was starting to get to him, making his fingers numb and his teeth. Then disaster struck. A huge gust of wind knocked a dead tree branch right onto his tent, which he had strapped to the outside of his backpack. David heard the terrible sound of ripping fabric when he managed to pull the branch away. His heart sank. There was a long tear right down the middle of his tent. It was completely ruined. Now David was really in trouble. Night was coming fast, and he had no shelter. The temperature was dropping, and he was already soaking wet. He knew that staying warm and dry was the most important thing for survival. But both of those things seemed impossible now. He kept walking, hoping to find something. Anything that could help. Maybe another hiker, maybe a shelter, maybe just a really thick tree that could block some of the rain. But the trail seemed empty. Everyone else had probably been smart enough to check the weather and stay home. David's energy was running low. He had been walking for hours in the storm, and his body was getting tired. His thoughts were starting to get fuzzy, which he knew was a bad sign. When you get too cold and too tired, your brain doesn't work right. You make bad decisions, sometimes really bad decisions. That's when he saw it. Just a tiny bit of light through the trees, glowing soft and warm in all that darkness and rain. At first, David thought he might be seeing things. But no, it was real. Someone had set up camp nearby, and they had a light on inside their tent. David stumbled toward the light, his legs feeling like they were made of rubber. He could barely feel his hands anymore, and his whole body was shaking from the cold. As he got closer, he could see that someone had found a really good camping spot. The tent was tucked between some big rocks that were blocking most of the wind. He stood there for a moment, rain pouring down his face, trying to think clearly. He knew he should probably call out, let whoever was in there know he was outside. That would be the right thing to do, the polite thing to do. But David's brain wasn't working normally anymore. He was so cold and so tired that he couldn't think straight. All he could think about was getting out of that terrible storm, getting warm, getting dry, staying alive. The tent was quiet. Whoever was inside seemed to be asleep. David knew what he was about to do was wrong, but he felt like he didn't have a choice. He was in real danger out there in the storm, and this might be his only chance to survive the night. Very quietly, trying not to make any noise, David unzipped the outer part of the tent. There was a small area before you got to the main sleeping area. It wasn't big, but it was dry and it blocked the wind. He crawled inside and zipped it back up behind him. The relief was immediate. No more rain hitting his face. No more wind trying to knock him over. It was still cold, but it felt like paradise compared to being outside. David could hear someone breathing softly in the main part of the tent, but they seemed to be sleeping peacefully. He knew he should wake them up and explain what happened. He should apologize and ask for help properly, but exhaustion hit him like a truck. His body had been fighting the cold and the storm for so long that now, finally being somewhere safe, he couldn't keep his eyes open anymore. David curled up in the small space, still wearing his wet clothes, still shivering, but finally out of danger. He told himself he would explain everything in the morning. He would apologize and make it right. But for now, he just needed to sleep. As he drifted off, David had no idea that his life was about to change completely. He had no idea that the person sleeping just a few feet away would become the most important person in his world. All he knew was that he was safe, and that was enough. David walked south for 3 hours before he finally stopped to check his phone. He told himself he was just making sure he had signal, but really, he was hoping Maya had texted him. She hadn't, but that was okay. They had literally just said goodbye. Still, he found himself thinking about her as he hiked. The way she had stayed so calm when she found him in her tent. How she had made jokes to help him feel less embarrassed. The sound of her laugh when she teased him about talking in his sleep. That evening, when David set up his new tent at a campsite, he took a picture of the sunset over the mountains. Before he could talk himself out of it, he sent it to Maya with a message. Made it to camp safely. Thanks again for everything. His phone buzzed back 20 minutes later. Beautiful view. Glad you're safe. I'm at a campsite too, but my sunset isn't nearly as pretty. And just like that, they started texting. At first, it was just simple messages. David would send pictures of interesting things he saw on the trail. A family of deer, a waterfall, a really cool rock formation. Maya would tell him funny stories from work or share photos from her own weekend hikes. But as the days went by, their conversations got deeper. David found himself looking forward to Maya's messages. More than anything else, she was easy to talk to, and she seemed genuinely interested in his hiking adventure and his thoughts about what he wanted to do with his life. Maya was having the same experience. After long, stressful shifts at the hospital, getting messages from David felt like a breath of fresh air. He had a way of seeing beauty in simple things, and his messages always made her smile. 2 weeks after they met, Maya made a decision that surprised even her. She had a long weekend coming up, and instead of staying home and relaxing like she usually did, she looked up where David would be on the trail. There was a small town called Pine Ridge where hikers often stopped to resupply, and according to his messages, David was planning to be there on Saturday. Maya called the one hotel in Pine Ridge and booked a room. Then she sent David a message. Hey, I know this might be crazy, but I'm thinking of driving up to Pine Ridge this weekend. Want to grab dinner? David's phone was in his backpack. When the message came in, he was taking a break from hiking, sitting by a stream and eating lunch when he finally saw the message an hour later. He read it 3 times to make sure he wasn't imagining it. He called her immediately. Are you serious? He asked as soon as she answered. Completely serious, Maya said. Unless you don't want to see me again. I know we just met and this might be weird. Are you kidding? David said. This is the best news I've gotten in months. I can't wait to see you. That's Saturday. David walked into Pine Ridge feeling more excited than he had in years. He had managed to shower at a hostel and put on his cleanest hiking clothes, but he was still nervous. What if seeing Maya again was awkward? What if the connection they had felt was just because of the crazy situation they had met in? All his worries disappeared the moment he saw her sitting in the small restaurant, looking at the menu. She was wearing jeans and a simple blue sweater, and when she looked up and saw him, her face lit up with the same smile he remembered. "You made it," she said, standing up to give him a hug. "I can't believe you drove all the way up here," David said. "I can't believe it either," Maya said, "but I'm really glad I did." They talked for hours over dinner, and it felt like no time had passed at all. David told her about the amazing things he had seen on the trail, the people he had met, and how the hiking was helping him figure out what he wanted to do next. Maya shared stories from work and talked more about her idea to try travel nursing. "I've been thinking about what you said," David told her, "about doing something that actually matters. I think I want to work for a nonprofit, maybe something related to conservation or helping people get outdoors." "That sounds perfect for you," Maya said. "You clearly love being in nature, and you're good at explaining things. You could help people discover what you've discovered out here." When the weekend was over, saying goodbye was even harder than the first time. But they both knew this wasn't just a one-time thing anymore. They were building something real. Over the next month, Maya drove to meet David to more times. Each visit confirmed what they were both starting to realize. This wasn't just a friendship anymore. They were falling for each other in a big way. The long-distance thing was hard, but it was also kind of exciting. Their relationship was built on really getting to know each other through their conversations, and then having these intense, wonderful weekends together in beautiful places. David started planning his route around places where Maya could easily visit. Maya started taking more long weekends than she ever had before. Her coworkers teased her about her sudden love of road trips, but she didn't care. 3 months after they first met, David was getting close to finishing his hike. He had been on the trail for almost 5 months total, and he was ready to start the next chapter of his life. The question was, what would that chapter look like? He was pretty sure he knew the answer, and it involved a certain nurse who had changed everything by not kicking him out of her tent on a stormy night. David's face was so red that Maya thought he might actually catch fire. She had never seen someone look so embarrassed in her entire life. And that was saying something considering all the awkward situations she had dealt with in the hospital. I mean, David stumbled over his words, looking like he wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear forever. Maya felt a little bad for teasing him, but she couldn't help it. There was something about his genuine embarrassment that was actually kind of sweet. Most guys would have tried to play it cool or make some joke, but David just looked mortified. "Relax," she said, pouring coffee into her extra camping cup. "I'm just messing with you. Here, drink this. You still look pretty cold." David took the cup gratefully, wrapping his hands around it to warm up his fingers. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for the coffee, for not kicking me out, for not calling the police, for everything." "Don't mention it," Maya said. "So, what's your story? What are you doing out here hiking alone?" As David warmed up and drank the coffee, he started to relax a little. He told Maya about his hiking trip, how he had been on the trail for 3 weeks. He explained about losing his job a few months ago and how his girlfriend had broken up with him. Right after that, "I needed to get away from everything," David said. "Figure out what I want to do with my life. You know, the trail seemed like a good place to think." Maya nodded. "I get that. That's actually kind of why I'm out here too." "Really?" David asked, looking surprised. "Yeah," Maya said, looking out at the mountains through her tent opening. "I've been working as a nurse for 5 years, and I love helping people, but the hospital where I work is it's too much, too many patients, not enough time, everyone's stressed all the time. I've been thinking about maybe doing travel nursing instead. Go to different places, help out where they need me, see more of the world." "That sounds amazing." David said, I've always wanted to travel more, but I was always too focused on my career to take the time. What kind of work did you do? Maya asked. I worked in marketing for a tech company, David said. Good money, but I spent most of my time in meetings talking about things that didn't really matter. It wasn't until I lost the job that I realized I wasn't really happy there anyway. They talked for almost an hour, sharing stories about their lives while Maya made breakfast on her small camping stove. She had packed extra food, knowing that she always ate more when she was hiking, so there was plenty to share. David was amazed by how easy it was to talk to Maya. She was funny and smart, and she had a way of listening that made him want to tell her everything. He found himself sharing things he hadn't talked about with anyone, not even his ex-girlfriend. You know, Maya said as she handed him a plate of scrambled eggs and toast. For someone who broke into my tent in the middle of the night, you're surprisingly good company. David laughed. I promise that's not usually how I meet people. I should hope not, Maya said. That would be a very expensive dating strategy. Buying new tents all the time. Are you saying this is a date? David asked, then immediately looked embarrassed again. Sorry, I didn't mean. Maybe the weirdest first date ever, Maya said with a smile, but definitely memorable. After breakfast, they started packing up their gear. David's backpack was still pretty wet from the storm, but Maya helped him organize his stuff so it would dry better as he hiked. Where are you heading next? Maya asked as she rolled up her sleeping bag. South, David said. I'm planning to hike for another few weeks, maybe a month if my money holds out. I'm going north. Maya said, I've got 4 more days before I have to get back to work. They both got quiet for a moment. Neither of them wanted to say goodbye, which was weird considering they had just met under the strangest circumstances possible. This might sound crazy, David said, but would it be okay if I got your number? I'd love to stay in touch, maybe let you know how the rest of my hike goes. Maya smiled. I was hoping you'd ask. I want to hear about your adventures. And maybe I can send you some pictures from my own hikes. They exchanged phone numbers and social media information. David helped Maya finish packing up her tent, the same tent where they had spent such an unusual night. Thank you again, David said as they prepared to head in opposite directions on the trail. I know what I did was wrong, and I know you could have handled it very differently. You probably saved my life. Just promise me you'll be more careful, Maya said. Check the weather, have a backup plan, and maybe don't sleep in random people's tents anymore. I promise, David said, laughing. Though I have to say, it worked out pretty well this time. Maya shouldered her backpack and started walking north. After a few steps, she turned around. David? She called out, Yeah, for what it's worth. You seem like a pretty good guy to have in someone's dreams. And with that, she walked away, leaving David standing there with a huge smile on his face and a feeling that maybe, just maybe, getting lost in that storm was the best thing that had ever happened to him. Maya had always been a light sleeper, especially when camping alone. It was something she had learned during her years working as a nurse in the emergency room. You develop a sense for when something isn't quite right, even when you're sleeping. So, when she heard the soft sound of her tent zipper opening around midnight, Maya was instantly awake. Her heart started beating faster, but she stayed completely still, listening carefully. She heard someone moving around in the outer part of her tent, very quietly, like they were trying not to wake her up. Maya's first thought was fear. Who was out there? What did they want? But then she heard heavy breathing, the kind that comes from being really tired or really cold, or both. She could also hear the person shivering. Years of working in the hospital had taught Maya to stay calm in scary situations. Instead of panicking or screaming, she listened more carefully. The breathing sounded exhausted, not threatening, and whoever it was seemed to be trying very hard not to disturb her. Maya quietly reached for the small flashlight she always kept near her sleeping bag. She turned it on its lowest setting and carefully unzipped the inner part of her tent just enough to peek outside. What she saw surprised her. There was a man curled up in her tent's outer area, soaking wet and shaking from the cold. His clothes were completely drenched, and she could see that his lips looked a little blue. As a nurse, Maya recognized the signs immediately. This person was dealing with hypothermia. The man was clearly exhausted and seemed to be falling asleep. Despite being cold and wet, Maya watched him for a few minutes, trying to figure out what to do. He didn't look dangerous. He looked like someone who had gotten caught in the storm and was just trying to survive. Maya made a quick decision. She quietly got some extra blankets from her gear and carefully placed them near the stranger, without waking him up. Then she went back to her sleeping area and waited for morning, checking on him every hour or so to make sure he was okay. When the sun started coming up, Maya made herself some coffee using her small camping stove. She sat cross-legged in her tent, sipping the warm drink and watching the stranger slowly wake up. She had to admit, she was curious about this whole situation. David's eyes opened slowly. For a moment, he looked confused, like he couldn't remember where he was. Then his eyes focused on Maya, and his face went completely red with embarrassment. "Oh no," he said, sitting up quickly. "Oh no, oh no, oh no." Maya couldn't help but smile a little. "Well," she said, taking another sip of her coffee, "this is definitely a first for me." David started talking very fast, stumbling over his words. "I am so sorry. I know how this looks. I know this is terrible. I was in the storm, and my tent got destroyed, and I was getting hypothermia, and I saw your light. And I know I should have woken you up, but I was so cold and tired, and I wasn't thinking straight. And I just needed to get out of the rain and breathe." Maya said calmly, "Just breathe for a second." David stopped talking and took a deep breath. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the ground. "Are you hurt?" Maya asked. "Do you need medical help?" "No, I think I'm okay now," David said. "Just really, really embarrassed." Maya studied his face. She had gotten good at reading people during her years in the emergency room. Some people lied, some people tried to hide things, and some people were just genuinely good people who had found themselves in bad situations. David seemed like the third type. "What's your name?" she asked. "David," he said, "and again, I'm so incredibly sorry about this. I'm Maya," she said, "and honestly, you're lucky I'm a nurse. When I saw how cold and wet you were last night, my first thought was about making sure you didn't get worse hypothermia, not about calling the police." David's eyes widened. "You were awake? You saw me coming?" "I'm a light sleeper," Maya said. "Comes with the job. But you look like you were in real trouble. So I decided to let you sleep it off instead of kicking you out into the storm." "I can't believe you did that," David said. "Most people would have, I don't know, screamed or called for help or something." Maya shrugged. "Most people don't work in emergency rooms. You learn to tell the difference between people who are dangerous and people who are just having the worst day of their life." David looked down at his hands. It really was the worst day. Everything that could go wrong went wrong. "Want some coffee?" Maya asked. "You look like you need it." David looked up at her, surprised. "You're offering me coffee? After I basically broke into your tent?" "Well," Maya said with a grin, "you'd spend the night mumbling my name in your sleep. And since we just met, that's either really creepy or really weird. I'm hoping for weird." David's face turned red again. "I was talking in my sleep for about an hour," Maya said, laughing. "So I have to ask, am I in your dreams now?"